Hello, everybody. This is Steve McKeon.
And this is Lupe Munoz. Welcome, everyone, back to our show. Steve and I were kind of contemplating, like, hey, how are we going to wrap up season 3? Because it's been a great season. So we started really thinking about what Dan Fleming, who was our last guest on this show, and he really said something that resonated with both of us, Steve. I hope you don't mind me speaking for you, too. But the comment he made is like, hey, I'm a lifelong learner. Still learning. And it really kind of triggered in our minds all the learning that we have done as being part of this podcast. We thought we'd take you down reflection lane and share some of the takeaways from some of these episodes and talk about the people that were our guests, but within the context of, hey, you always have to strive to learn from others. And as a leader, that's probably one of those universal lessons that we hope all our listener family out there across the globe, right, that you take away, because in some way you're going to have to figure out how to do that. We're all in different situations. But I think you should strive to make connections, meet new leaders, new perspectives, and learn the lessons that they bring. Steve, what's your thought about my opening comment there?
Got a lot of different thoughts kind of rolling through my head as we're reflecting on season 3. As we talked about direction we want to go in season 4. So I'm really excited to share this episode with the listeners. And really, it's been a lot of great feedback over season 2 that set the stage for season 3, where it was kind of a good balance, we felt, of guests and then our drive time conversations. Lupe, I think, is how we framed up the podcast initially, was putting together the conversations you and I were having on our car rides home as we closed out a day at the place we work. It's a lot of that. I really did resonate with Dan's comment of being a lifelong learner, passion of mine, not only being a lifelong learner, but a lifelong sharer of learnings. And so I think that's one of the things also, is that the reason we do this podcast, it's not monetized in any way. We're not getting anything out of it other than our enjoyment of collaborating together in this space, but also just sharing wisdom that we learn and wisdom from guests that are coming in. All in all, that's really kind of what drives me still to put together a podcast on a Saturday or Sunday with you, or late evenings.
Yeah.
And here we go. Yeah.
You're spot on, Steve, about what drove us to kind of start this podcast, right? But miraculously, and I guess in a way, it demonstrates what happens out in the real world, is for those of us that are trying to help others, we in turn have learned and benefited from it, from the experience, right? It's not just, hey, we're sacrificing only. Like, I feel enriched by the several guests that we had for season 3. And, we had 6 phenomenal guests in season 3. And we're going to kind of work our way from episode 1 and then just move on to the latest. We'll talk a little bit about season 4, because we already have a great guest lined up for season 4. Really, really awesome to be part of the experience with all these amazing people. Season 3 started with Ernesto Gomez, if you recall. What kind of stood out for you in that conversation that we had with Ernesto? Because we had such a great conversation that we actually had to split the episode into 2, if you recall.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
So the thing I loved about Ernesto was his passion for work he's doing, and just his story, how he really started off in one lane inside business and kind of moved into a whole different role. And through that journey was able to make a bigger, broader connection that would really benefit the organizations he was working with, and just had a great opportunity in that episode to expand beyond what he had started with initially in his journey. And so, a little background on Ernesto: he's written a book that you and I both have looked at and read. And through that book, it really kind of talks about this journey that he's gone on. And I will make sure to link the book again in the show notes, so you guys can go back, take a look at it as well. But his journey really landed him in a space of organizational health, or human resources, people management. And so the thing that we learn with Ernesto is just how important it is to have that be such a front end part of every plan within the business. And it all goes into the way that you treat people, that ensures that they stay into the organizations. And he had a lot of good sports analogies. I don't know, Lupe, if you want to share a couple that jumped out at you that he shared with us on that podcast. But just really going back to Dan's comment, Ernesto, lifelong learner, and has just shown how through lifelong learning, he's really been able to bring value to the organizations that he's worked for, but just create a passion for himself of learning and being present. You want to hit any comments from your perspective, Lupe, with Ernesto?
Steve, I really don't remember any of the analogies or metaphors that he used for sport teams, but I do remember the name of his book. It's called Regrowth: How Organizations Can Overcome Stalling by Unlocking Their People Potential. And the discussions we had with him were around unlocking organizational potential and about how you can transform your team and organization through being a specific type of leader and focusing on those things that you mentioned. Do you remember what was the analogies that he was talking about or using?
He'd referenced a lot around the NBA and going back even to Michael Jordan time frame. And I think that just the whole concept of having great players doesn't guarantee a great output or the things you need to have a great team.
Now it's resonating with me. I think one of the things he also said is like, hey, the main piece of an organization is the team, not the individual.
Yes.
Right. And to your point, like, hey, you can have all these great players, but if they're not functioning as a great team, then you're probably not going to be going to those championships. Yeah. And then after that, we had a very unique guest in Stephen Puri. And Stephen was very charismatic speaker, and he was talking about flow states. Specifically, how do you lead in a hybrid era? So for those that have teams that are working remotely or, have that hybrid schedule of working in the office a few days and then working remotely other days, he's like, hey, how do you lead that team, and how do you keep the connection and that team vibe, if you will? And Stephen had some really great background. He started in the film industry, produced some really great movies, the Transformers movies. It was really interesting to hear how getting into a flow state and understanding that and making those individuals very productive, and then how to lead those individuals. How is that different than leading a typical team?
Thing that resonated to me, one, just Stephen's charisma, as you mentioned, but just the fact that, he was at a stage in his journey where he was so passionate about giving back what he had learned. And I thought just all the right reasons for sharing the knowledge and stuff that he's gained. And I like the fact that as we were going through the conversations with him, both before the actual podcast recording and during, he just would very bold in speaking and challenging a couple of things. Things I learned a lot about him was just making sure that as you start to collaborate with others, you have to find those times where both parties are at their best to collaborate. And sometimes it can be the environment that you set yourself in. He talked a lot about just, making sure that time of day is really important. And I think the other thing he shared with us is you're not, just because someone's not working the same time that everybody else is working, doesn't mean they're not contributing. You have to understand that as a leader to really help position your team for their best output, because to drive somebody into a classic, let's just say 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 type job when their creative time is noon to 8 at night or earlier in the morning was really, I thought, important, and some great context. Yeah, the other thing with Stephen that I think was really unique is the fact that before the pandemic, he'd already learned how to do a lot of virtual type of work around the world. And similar to my experience, working with a multinational company, I had to use a lot of like early on technology. And that was kind of funny as we were reflecting before the recording, just in, how clunky it was. But at the time, it was so amazing. I can remember doing Messenger homework with my son one time and thinking, wow, this is amazing. I'm like very far away. Another conversation with my daughter one time, when I was outside the US, and just really kind of neat to see that technology evolve. And then I think he brought in a little bit around how to use that technology in a more creative way in current time and state. Would love to reconnect with Stephen, as you mentioned, and just kind of find out how he's doing and where he's at in that journey that he was sharing with us.
Then from there, we took a bit of a change in focus on the next episode 5, with Mark Reich, where we really talked about the art of strategic alignment of organization. And for those that remember, or those that don't know, Mark Reich is the author of a book titled Managing on Purpose, which is all around strategic deployment, specifically Hoshin Kanri, strategic deployment. Really, really great discussion that we had there, Steve.
As you and I have grown up with a lot of lean practice and thinking, and really kind of being a foundation of what we do in the organizations we work with. Mark was one of those guys that I had always kind of followed, and it was really great having a chance to meet him and share some similar experiences. Both him and I had worked in automotive for quite a while, he with Toyota and then some subcontractors. And just some of the shared lessons that I had learned and experienced, and then to see his work within Toyota and just, really confirming a lot of what I had learned. I think the other interesting thing with Mark is that, he really brings a genuine perspective into what I call the mystic side of lean manufacturing sometimes, that he's very practical and pragmatic. And, there's not a lot that you have to magically figure out how to make happen. His approach and what he shared with us in Hoshin planning was very systematic, and called out some of the things that companies do incorrectly in that space when they take on too many top level priorities, right? And you can't focus on the meaningful ones. The other thing I picked up with Mark was the fact that leaders have to lead. They've got to be the ones doing this work. This is not delegation work. You've got to be top down, engaged to drive the kind of improvement that Mark was talking about.
The biggest aha moment for me, one of the biggest, there was a few, but I'd say the one that really kind of was not what I expected was the fact that the X matrix, for those of you that are familiar with Hoshin Kanri, the X matrix, which is a tool for Hoshin Kanri strategic deployment. Like, I was surprised that he's like, yeah, I actually didn't know about the tool or use the tool for quite some time. So I guess the point being that it's not about the tool, it's about the process and the method and the discussions that are happening and the alignment that's happening with leaders across the organization. And very much like other things that we've talked about, Steve, it's like, hey, don't get hung up on the tools so much. Get hung up on the intention behind the tools. Whether it's a lean tools or anything else, there's always some intention behind them that can get lost. And because of that loss, they're so focused on the mechanics of it that they don't understand the spirit of it. So to me, that was a big aha moment for me.
Yeah, really good. And Lupe, I love the fact that you actually challenged something Mark said in that conversation. And I'll leave that as kind of a teaser for folks to go back and listen to that episode again. And so it's just a great exchange. Really appreciate Mark. And we're in our current practice using his book in a lot of our strategic planning. So really great to see him publish that, because I felt like that was kind of a missing thing within the world of lean transformation, is that Toyota specific way of doing planning. And to your point, the X matrix, as I learned it, was through Danaher. So I think it's probably designed by Danaher, and most companies that use it will recognize the description of it, but I think, again, Mark took it to just a much more stripped down basic level, less complicated, and some really good lessons in that conversation.
Yeah.
Lupe, as we as we traveled on in season 3, we ran into a guy named Derek Traeger, who was just really an interesting. I mean, all of our guests are interesting. His story really interesting, resonated in a lot of ways with some of the things that we've talked about on the show and with others. But we're in this current time frame of AI being present and trying to figure out how to use it. And this goes back to season 2, in one of our conversations back then with Ron Crabtree, where, he spoke to us about, you're going to have to figure out how to use this technology because it's here, and folks that know how to use it are going to be able to outperform folks that don't know how to use it. So there's a lot of interest, obviously, growing. And Derek took us to his place in time where he's started to explore how to leverage AI in his background and world of a skilled maintenance tradesman and also a technical trainer for some pretty significant companies like Amazon.
Yeah, that's where he started.
Walk us through what we learned from Derek.
Like you said, he was working with Amazon. Eventually, he started his own company. And it was based on some of the lessons that he'd learned and some of the approaches. But the company's called Pocket Mentor, or I think the app. I think it was an app that was what he shared with us. But the interesting thing and the topic we were really focused on with Derek was the importance of training from a leadership perspective, making sure that the trust has been established in order to have quality training, and the ability of the person teaching to really gain the students or the students' trust that there's good intention and that the training that's happening is quality training. So there's just a lot of important focus, because I think sometimes we can get caught up that we don't have time to train. Like, hey, we're so busy that we need these people to start doing things. And instead of investing quality time, being able to train people right, I'll say, adequately, carefully, thoughtfully, then, you're going to get what you put into it. And he was sharing about the great successes that he was having. And I think he even told us that they started some of their training with Amazon. At least they started some of their training by really just spending that time going through activities, exercises that build trust among the group before they even started talking about the technical aspects of whatever they were trying to teach them.
Yeah, and I think his time at Amazon, what he was able to accomplish there with a great mentor and supporter of the work he was doing, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But they reduced their turnover in their technical skilled positions significantly with the practice of just, understanding where those folks were coming from and finding a way to give them a voice. The other thing I really liked with Derek's episode was, he talked about inclusiveness of all team members. So he shared with us that he had a late in life diagnosis of ADHD and dyslexia, probably slightly autistic, he said, in his background as well. And so, once that diagnosis was made, it really helped him learn, some of the ways that he works would be potentially different than the way another person would work. And I really started thinking about, okay, everybody's got different styles of learning. Everybody needs to be able to find a voice, and we're all going to find voices different way. And I think I shared with Derek, I can't remember if it was on the podcast or during the conversation before, just myself having a late in life diagnosis of dyslexia and probably some ADHD as well. And it just, when I learned that, I'm like, okay, that explains a lot of the way I had to learn, get through, high school and college and just even in life in general. So, I appreciated him sharing that with us. And I think it really shows that there's opportunities for people in all different places to collaborate and participate. And, not only is he a person that is, really kind of champion that information, but, clear example of how that can be done. So, yeah, really appreciated Derek and the conversation.
I remember in our discussion, he kind of echoed some of the sentiment around, hey, AI is not going to be something to replace humans. It's going to be something that's going to augment humans and just make them better, right? So at least that was his take on it, and how he was approaching, the company that he had, is how can we help humans perform their tasks better and easier. So after that, the following episode 7, right, we had another great personality, Salvatore Monzi. We really focused for that episode around the art of leadership communication and how important it is to be able to communicate effectively, to connect to your audience. And he was talking about how some very, very knowledgeable, smart, intellectual individuals can absolutely be ineffective or dilute their effectiveness. I'll say, if they're not able to really communicate well with others, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times in the technical world, you've got to be able to do both, right? You've got to be able to be that very technical person when you need to speak in that language with others. But his message was you also have to be a great communicator at all levels. And so one of the areas of his practice and focus is teaching people that have that kind of more technical background how to speak with clarity, presence, and confidence. And, he shared his own story about as he watched his father, who was a presenter and educator, instructor, and kind of walk it into those same shoes, and then really having this moment of like fear, and got on stage and just had that whole stage fright, and how he's worked through that, and says in the episode with us, there's lots of ways that you can overcome those things. So don't let that be the barrier. Learn what you can do to kind of work through and become a great communicator, because that's so important, especially in those kind of technical roles that he tends to focus on. But, I say he tends to focus on, I mean, he's doing keynotes for world leaders, and he's beyond just that technical area of expertise, because leadership and communication and being that expert in that space is important for all people that need to get in front of an audience, need to help teams evolve. All that is critical. So I really enjoyed Salvatore's visit with us. And as I recall, Lupe, he is soon to have a book published. We will have to go back and add that into the show notes. I have not got a copy of that yet, but it just dawned on me that that's a miss on my part, because I definitely wanted to get on that list of first read.
The book title, I believe he said was Clear and Compelling, and it's communication strategies for big thinkers with bold ideas. So definitely something we need to look into, Steve, and see if it's already out. I thought he said it was a few months away, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then after that, we brought it home, right? Our last, definitely not our least, but our last guest, Dan Fleming from GBMP.
Yeah, so GBMP is a affiliate consultant or licensed consultant with the Shingo Institute. And Dan and I, our paths have crossed throughout my career, especially back in the automotive days. This is my first opportunity really in the current role I have, getting to know Dan more. And again, kind of like Mark Wright, these guys that are part of this lean transformation in the U.S. market space is where I learned about GBMP and Dan and the associates that work there, and got some great lessons. Dan is really a fun guy to talk with, and has got so much information to share. And, he could be the guy with all the wisdom and instruction. But as he mentioned to us, his passion of being a lifelong learner has really kept him interested and fueled and not burned out on what he does. And he's just a great resource. Him and GBMP are fantastic partners that we're working with currently in our current roles. And we're working through as an organization, going to Shingo conferences and the inner workings of the Shingo model. Dan and GBMP have just really been some good mentors for the organization. So I highly recommend listening to that episode. And yep. I don't know, Lupe, if you want to talk a little bit about Dan or maybe just introduce Shingo model to this group of listeners so we can encourage them to go back and maybe listen to the episode with Dan.
All the episodes we have just discussed all have an important element, I think, from a leader's perspective that will help someone's career, help someone be a better leader. Like if I were to be able to get this information when I first started, my leadership journey, I just feel like I would have been so much ahead of the game. But in the specific discussion with Dan, we really talked about two elements. We combined two things, like servant leadership meets the Shingo model. And for those that are not really familiar, the Shingo model is around operational excellence and understanding the components of culture. And one of the things that Dan said that really resonated with us is, hey, in the end, we show about tools, we talk about systems, but we're really focused on culture. And that really helped me. It really brought it home for me. And the two together, the servant leadership aspect and following the Shingo model and understanding the Shingo model and how systems drive those ideal behaviors really allows you to foster an environment and a culture that's really around operational excellence. And everything improves with operational excellence, right? Your safety improves, your quality, team morale and engagement, job satisfaction of the people on your team, business results, productivity, all of those things can all benefit from operational excellence. So as a leader, if you're really good at understanding those two concepts, the Shingo model and servant leadership, then I think that's like putting you on steroids for some type of weightlifting program. And one of the things we really picked apart from Shingo was two of the guiding principles, which was respect every individual and lead with humility, which are really, I would say, very synonymous with servant leader.
Yeah, Lupe, and the conversation leading up to our podcast, because, we have a chance to work with Dan in our current roles that we've got, but also just on the Saturday that we prepped for the call with him. We went down so many different avenues with Dan that we're really looking forward to, being able to stay connected with Dan even further. And I would say with all of our guests that we've had on to date, continue to stay in contact with most of them and really continue to learn from those folks. And got leading into season 4, as we start to look at that, the feedback continues to be, and we didn't really talk about the episodes in between, but, Lupe and I will continue to have kind of the one-on-one conversations. We've talked with our friend Alex Aranda, and we'll probably have her in on some of those conversations as well with us. And those are the drive home conversations that we like to have and just talk about leadership practice in general, things that we've learned and, where we want to go. And in addition, the guests that we're looking at for season 4, we're really excited about and forward to any of you that are listeners and maybe want to reach out to us with either a name of somebody you think would be great to have on the podcast, or even yourself. That would be fantastic.
It's been an outstanding year with season 3, and I'm already excited about season 4. I think we're going to start really strong with our first guest to the show for season 4. And I'm already looking forward to other people that will get to learn it or meet and learn from. So super excited. And I think our listeners, our listening family's ability to provide us feedback always helps us improve our show, improve our content, make it more relevant. Would love to hear any ideas of topics maybe that we haven't even discussed yet. I'm sure there's some out there, or something that we've already discussed, but from a different perspective or a different context, I think could be interesting. And then there's a lot of continued discussions we can have with some of our guests from the first two seasons that we're hoping to revisit with them and see what's going on in their world. So exciting times, and looking forward to it, Steve. It's always a pleasure for you and I to get together and talk. I mean, we do it outside this podcast, right? A lot. This is just an extension of it. And I am excited to have Alex Aranda joining us on a more regular basis. That's going to add a different dynamic, I think, to the conversation.
Yeah, we'll have someone on my side to gang up on you at times. Hey, Lupe, I think I just want to take a moment here and recognize our listeners. We kind of joke about our family being our core listeners, which they are our core listeners, but the information that we're able to get from Buzzsprout that kind of shows, who's listening out there, not by name, but just by locations. We've been able to basically hit every continent now, with the exception of Antarctica, but who knows, that might change. And it's very rewarding to see that, the message, the information that, we're able to share is getting out there. Again, our biggest audience still obviously would be here in the United States, but we're seeing good pockets in Southeast Asia, Europe, presence. We're in Africa, South America, Central America, Canada. And I just want to thank those listeners out there, and please continue to share with others you think would enjoy the podcast. And then also, again, feedback if there's things very specific you would like us to look at and share, happy to. And, for those of you that want to try being on the podcast for an episode, we're always looking to that kind of audience participation as well. So anyway, thank you to everybody for being listeners. It's exciting to think got through 3 seasons and still have a lot of energy, ready to go into season 4. And Lupe, I love the partnership. Greatly appreciate you. And like you said, let's go with season 4. We got some exciting stuff coming up.
Absolutely. And with that said, this is Lupe Munoz.
And I'm Steve McKeon. Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Exchange.
Have a great day.